So the harmonic balancer install tool is meant to take this guy and press it on to the crankshaft. We slip it in place in the keyway, and that's all we get. And the biggest no-no in the world, again, you would never do that. That's going to completely trash your internal thrust bearings. That's going to trash the face of the hammer. Even with a brass hammer, the amount of force you would have to hit is not a good idea. So the balancer install tool is what you would need to do. Some people would think, well, why don't I just take the center bolt and use it to push the balancer on? As a horrible, horrible idea, unfortunately, because these threads, this little bolt and the little 5/8 head on this particular engine, it's just going to strip. The amount of force it's going to take to push that on, this bolt will strip, and then you're going to have your crankshaft threads retapped, and you're going to run a big risk. Do not use the center bolt to thread that in place. So let's get our balancer. Let's get it onto the keyway. That's it right there as a starting position. We've already set up our tool, so we're just making sure it's threaded out enough to first thread in the all thread into the nose of the crankshaft. And I'm going to back up the spin down nut and the push washer at first, so we get to a point where that's basically seated. Now the tool's installed into the nose of the crankshaft, and we can start to push down the nut. Now we're going to have the same scenario as when we had pulled the balancer. It's going to want to rotate. So we'll start rotating, and we're going to get to a point really quick where the crankshaft is going to start spinning, and it's not going to start threading on anymore. So, like we did before, on an engine building stand, of course, we have easy access. We'll put a hammer handle to stop the crank from rotating. But in the case of an install in a car, you would have to grab the flex plate from below or disable one of the cylinders by putting in the top dead center location tool. You pull out a spark plug, put in the top dead center location stop. The piston would come up and would stop rotating. There's a couple ways to stop your engine from rotating, but this is how we're going to do it today. Put a hammer handle up here, and there we go. It just stopped rotating the crankshaft. So now we're starting to, as we tighten this, we're physically pressing on the balancer. And here you'll see very quickly that this is not an easy thing to do. I'm having to put a lot of force onto this nut to spin it on. I mean, I'm hulkingly huge and muscular, but it's still difficult for me. And you can imagine how tough this would be if you're leaning inside the engine bay. So the right tool for the job, you can imagine what that would do. That amount of force applied to this little bolt is going to strip out these threads really quick. So fair warning. We've got about, I don't know, a ½ inch to go still. And we did put some lubricant on the crankshaft nose itself, and it just keeps going. It's pressing, not getting any easier, but at one point it gets tougher and tougher and tougher the closer it gets in there, even with this being the right tool. But we've got another ½ inch to go. So we're getting really close down here. We've got maybe a ½ inch of gap existing down here against or between the lower gear and the back of the balancer itself. You know, at this point you could install your water pump, and you could temporarily install the pulley. You could remove your tool and install the pulley. Some pulleys will slide over the tool, but this one will not. And then this is where, if you needed to, you could adjust the alignment of your pulleys based on how far you press on the balancer. In most cases, you need to press it on all the way until it contacts the face of the timing gear. So This is not easy at this point. So you can imagine how the force of the blows you'd have to hit with a hammer if you were going to try and do it that way, which you should never, and how difficult this would be and how stressful it would be on the threads of a center bolt. But we're getting very close here, and it almost feels like, even with this nice large 12-inch crescent wrench, it almost feels like it doesn't want to spin, but it's still barely moving, and we're getting really, really close to its seating, but it's still turning. And so we're about a 1/16 away, a couple more quarter turns, and that feels like it's getting really close there, and then it just stops. Like you couldn't move it any further. So we know we've absolutely contacted the timing gear. And that was a workout. So if we had chose to use something besides a large crescent on the actual nut itself, say we had a very long socket and a socket wrench, a ratchet wrench out here, we've offset all that force from here, where we're applying it directly to the nut. We're offsetting all that force out here, and we're also running the risk of splitting open one of those possibly cheaper made longer extensions. And we can tell right here that we would need a good 6-inch extension deep socket to do that. So again, this is the right tool for the job. There are other ways you could possibly do it, but this combination is probably your best bet. Getting the tool off now, you'd have to disable the crank again from the other side and just loosen the nut itself. I know we just tightened it, but now we need to loosen the nut. It's loose a little bit. Tool's not coming out though, because we need this little guy to actually break it free from the threads in the crankshaft. So we of course have done this. We're going to have to remove the balancer, put on our timing cover, and then reinstall the final balancer. But this at least gives you an idea of what's going on behind the timing cover, where you had to go and press all the way in until we contacted the face of the lower timing gear. And that is the right tool for the job.
You've just watched the use of a single tool dedicated to the installation of a harmonic balancer onto a crankshaft. Installation is the second half of the complete job. At boxwrench.net, we offer a combined tool that performs both tasks of removal and installation of the harmonic balancer to and from the nose of most types of crankshafts. If you're new to engine building, or just interested in the theories of engine mechanics, you might want to check out the Basic Engine Building DVD that is also available at boxwrench.net. It's a 3-hour video tutorial that covers all engine rebuilding procedures and tools that are universal to any type of gas-powered piston engine, no matter how many cylinders, import or domestic.